On January 14, 2010, a man was found lifeless inside room 317 of a luxury hotel in Manama, Bahrain. That man was Nasir Kazmi, a Hamas operative linked to escape networks, whose mysterious death ignited whispers of Mossad's invisible hand. The hotel corridor was hushed, its polished marble echoing with the shuffle of startled staff. Security cameras captured nothing unusual, only a man checking in with ordinary luggage. Yet behind the veneer of normalcy, an extraordinary hunt was unfolding. When Kazmi's body was discovered, his face appeared calm, as if sleep had claimed him. But seasoned investigators noticed irregularities: the locked door, the absence of struggle, the subtle bruising on his neck. Suspicion immediately replaced grief. News trickled into the Bahraini press cautiously. Officials whispered about cardiac arrest, but intelligence circles spoke a different language. They saw the patterns of tradecraft, the hallmarks of an assassination concealed beneath layers of plausible deniability. The city's serenity was about to fracture. By dusk, word reached regional intelligence networks. A Hamas planner, the architect of bold prison breaks and clandestine escapes, had been silenced. Was this the long arm of Israel's Mossad, or a rival faction's betrayal? The world leaned closer. The death of Nasir Kazmi was not a local footnote. It resonated across capitals, intelligence rooms, and war rooms. Here was a man who had orchestrated escapes from fortified prisons, who had embarrassed states, and who embodied the cunning persistence of Hamas. For Israel, Kazmi was a specter that haunted their security calculus. Each successful jailbreak seeded new commanders, new bomb makers, new operatives to replenish Hamas ranks. Eliminating him was not personal vengeance, but strategic arithmetic, designed to choke future insurgent lifelines. For Hamas, his absence was catastrophic. He was not merely a planner. He was an architect of survival, a craftsman of escape routes, tunnels, and smuggling chains. Without him, dozens of future operations risked collapse before conception. Meanwhile, regional actors sensed the tremors. Iran, Qatar, and Syria saw an invisible battle spilling into Manama's glittering skyline. Bahrain, aligned with Western allies, now found itself unwilling host to an assassination that could destabilize fragile balances across the Gulf. This was not only the silencing of one man, but a message. It declared that even in the safety of foreign hotels, in the embrace of luxury anonymity, enemies of Israel were vulnerable. Geography itself no longer guaranteed immunity. Who unlocked the final door to Nasir Kazmi's room that night? Was it a fellow guest, a shadow in the corridor, or a visitor armed with a forged passport and a lethal mission blessed by a distant government? Why Bahrain, a nation better known for pearl towers and banking facades, rather than the crowded alleys of Gaza or the restless streets of Damascus? Was this location chosen for its safety or for its illusion of safety? How did Kazmi, a man constantly shifting identities and countries, miscalculate this one fatal stay? Did arrogance blind him, or had his enemies been patient, mapping every step until inevitability cornered him without mercy? And what of Mossad, long whispered to be masterful predators of the Middle East? Did they weave this web alone, or did silent partners provide cover, intel, and convenient silence in exchange for favors unspoken? The questions ripple without answers, each one a fragment of a larger puzzle. What remains certain is that on that January night, shadows moved faster than light, and Nasir Kazmi's story shifted from clandestine escape plans to the chilling annals of political assassination. Nasir Kazmi was born in the early 1970s in Gaza, in a neighborhood where narrow alleys and unfinished buildings testified to both poverty and resilience. His childhood unfolded beneath the shadow of occupation, a crucible shaping loyalties and silent resentments. His father, a merchant of modest means, traded textiles and household goods, often clashing with bureaucratic restrictions and military checkpoints. The young Kazmi absorbed these daily humiliations, watching how frustration hardened into anger, and how anger gradually crystallized into political identity. His mother, deeply religious yet tender, filled the household with discipline wrapped in devotion. She reminded her children that survival required both faith and caution. From her, Nasir inherited patience, the ability to wait, and to mask true intentions. School was less an education and more an initiation into Gaza's peculiar duality. Lessons interrupted by raids, playgrounds scarred by violence, teachers divided between textbooks and resistance pamphlets. Kazmi learned arithmetic and scripture, alongside whispered instructions on secrecy and silence. Friends recall him as quiet, watchful, and unusually calculating for his age. Unlike others who expressed rage openly, he processed it inwardly, sketching escape plans in notebooks, imagining routes beyond walls, as though confinement was a problem demanding solutions. When the First Intifada erupted in 1987, Kazmi was still in adolescence, yet already steeped in the rhythms of rebellion. Stones, slogans, and street battles became his new textbooks, and the streets themselves transformed into classrooms of defiance and improvisation. The chaos of that uprising was formative. He witnessed cousins arrested, neighbors wounded, and family homes raided at night. Trauma became routine. For Kazmi, this relentless cycle did not only cultivate anger, it crystallized an obsession with breaking cages, literal and symbolic. By his late teens, he apprenticed under older youths, who taught him not only survival, but also ingenuity. They showed him how to move unseen, how to forge documents crudely, and how to memorize escape routes like sacred recitations. What others considered fear, Kazmi considered rehearsal. Each confrontation with soldiers, each interrogation at checkpoints, became practice for the future. By 20, he carried within him a paradoxical mix of obedience to faith and audacity against confinement. Thus, before Kazmi became a planner, before he earned notoriety, he was simply a child shaped by rubble and raids. Yet in those early years, the foundation of his later persona was cemented, patient, calculating, and obsessed with escape. Kazmi's ideology was not inherited passively but forged actively. He believed occupation was a cage built from checkpoints and concrete, and that every cage demanded an escape artist. Liberation, to him, was less about speeches than about creating cracks in confinement. Unlike peers drawn to fiery rhetoric, Kazmi valued planning. He quoted religious texts sparingly, instead using them as moral justifications for pragmatic action. Faith provided endurance, but strategy provided victory. He despised recklessness, dismissing it as wasteful bravado masking poor preparation. He cultivated the habit of obsessive note-taking. Friends recall him sketching blueprints of tunnels on napkins, mapping escape strategies in margins of newspapers. Every building he entered, he memorized exits. Every room, every alley, was a puzzle to solve. Curiously, Kazmi disliked weapons. He respected their necessity but loathed their noise. For him, true power was silence, forged documents, hidden doors, vanished men. His admiration was reserved not for gunmen, but for locksmiths, forgers, and engineers of disappearance. He carried quirks bordering on ritual. He never drank tea unless stirred counterclockwise 3 times. He always chose hotel rooms on the 3rd floor. These routines reassured him, patterns anchoring his life in an unpredictable landscape of espionage. Despite severity, he had humor, dry, biting, and rare. He would joke about checkpoints as free exercise stations or mock guards as unpaid tour guides of Palestine. Humor, though infrequent, was his pressure valve, released only among trusted confidants. Kazmi also displayed meticulous grooming. He trimmed his beard precisely, kept nails short, and favored neutral clothing that blended easily. Appearance, he insisted, was armor. Standing out was a liability. Blending in was survival. He embodied invisibility as art form. Thus, his quirks were not eccentricities, but calculated shields. His ideology fused faith with pragmatism, his personality fused caution with audacity, and his habits fused superstition with survival instinct. Together, these layers produced the planner feared by governments and revered by militants. In the labyrinthine world of Palestinian militancy, Kazmi acquired nicknames like currency. Among comrades, he was called the locksmith, a reference not to physical locks alone, but to his uncanny ability to unlock situations others deemed permanently sealed or hopeless. Israeli intelligence files reportedly labeled him the Phantom Planner. To them, his name became synonymous with vanishing prisoners, disappearing fugitives, and sudden escapes from maximum security cells. Each successful operation reinforced the legend, eroding the myth of invincibility surrounding fortified prisons. Kazmi himself preferred anonymity over glory. He once told an associate, "Heroes die early, but shadows live longer." This self-image guided his actions, pushing him to avoid cameras, avoid speeches, and instead build influence silently through logistics. Among militants, his reputation carried an aura of quiet genius. Younger recruits mythologized him as someone who could draw invisible maps across concrete walls. His nickname became less a label and more a prophecy, embedding him deeper into the collective imagination. To Kazmi, these nicknames were both shield and burden. They granted him prestige but also painted a target on his back. He lived balancing admiration with paranoia, understanding that myth could inspire followers, but also summon assassins. By the early 1990s, Kazmi's fascination with escape logistics crystallized into political engagement. He began attending underground meetings, not because of fiery sermons, but because those gatherings offered blueprints, connections, and access to networks that treated escape not as fantasy, but tactical necessity. His earliest contributions were modest. He smuggled letters into prisons, ferried coded messages disguised as grocery lists, and learned how to read guards' routines. While others preached revolution, he quietly tested vulnerabilities of the prison industrial machinery, tightening around Gaza. The political atmosphere offered fertile ground. Hamas, emerging as both social movement and militant force, required planners who could think beyond gunfire. Kazmi's skill set, maps, disguises, logistics, was prized. He was absorbed not as fighter, but as architect of freedom. By 1994, after the Oslo Accords reshaped Palestinian politics, disillusionment spread like wildfire. Kazmi saw negotiations as cages with polished keys. To him, diplomacy was an elaborate prison ward. Militancy, though riskier, offered something politicians never could: control over timing and escape. He refused roles that placed him at podiums or in offices. Instead, he volunteered to coordinate prisoner support networks, using his knowledge to orchestrate smuggling of tools, contraband phones, and crude lockpicks into cells under the noses of guards. Associates noted his obsession with precision. He timed prison meals, charted patrols, even studied the placement of security cameras. These details seemed insignificant, yet to Kazmi they were the foundations of liberation. Each unnoticed crack was an opportunity for subversion. Gradually, his reputation reached Hamas commanders. He was no longer an errand runner, but an operative capable of conceptualizing entire jailbreaks. Each successful plan elevated him higher, transforming him from anonymous shadow into indispensable strategist within the clandestine hierarchy of militant politics. By the decade's end, Kazmi's full transition was complete. He had abandoned the role of civilian son and student, embracing instead the mantle of escape planner. In this transformation lay both his power and the seeds of his eventual destruction. Kazmi's first documented clash with authorities occurred in 1995, when Israeli patrols intercepted him near Rafah, carrying forged documents tucked inside bread loaves. He was only briefly detained, but the incident marked the beginning of a long cat-and-mouse pursuit with security forces. Soon after, his activities escalated. He was implicated in aiding the escape of 2 Hamas members from a small Gaza holding cell. Official records were vague, but whispers in refugee camps pointed to Kazmi as the mastermind of the breakout. By 1997, Israeli security forces cataloged him as a mid-tier operative. Arrest warrants were drafted. His methods were unconventional. Instead of planting bombs or leading riots, he attacked through deception, forging paperwork, and rerouting guards with calculated distractions that seemed absurdly simple. One arrest in 1998 exposed his growing notoriety. Captured at Erez Crossing with counterfeit work permits, he endured weeks of interrogation, yet investigators noted his calm composure. He admitted nothing, smiled rarely, and eventually secured release through insufficient evidence and legal loopholes. Every detention increased his mystique. Each time he walked free, rumors spread of bribes, double agents, or miraculous cunning. To Hamas, he seemed untouchable. To Israel, he seemed infuriatingly slippery, a figure unwilling to yield under pressure or surveillance. Kazmi began constructing reputational armor. He told allies that arrests were rehearsals, each encounter teaching him where systems cracked. For every setback, he refined his methods, studying guard psychology, exploiting bureaucracy, and learning how to make institutions stumble against their own inertia. By 2000, his portfolio included smuggling prisoners' families into courtrooms with hidden tools, orchestrating fake medical emergencies for temporary releases, and bribing low-level officials with mundane luxuries. Arrests became interruptions, not deterrents. His name traveled further, carrying whispers of audacity and ingenuity. Thus, Kazmi's early crimes blurred lines between criminality and insurgency. They were not random acts, but calculated rehearsals for larger missions. Each arrest fed his legend, each release strengthened his resolve, and soon the stage was set for even deadlier confrontations. Kazmi's longest incarceration came in 2001, when Israeli forces captured him in a sweep across northern Gaza. This time, evidence was stronger: coded letters, forged IDs, and testimonies. He entered prison not as a petty offender, but as a significant asset. Inside confinement, interrogators subjected him to relentless questioning. Former cellmates recall his resilience under duress, describing sessions of physical beatings and psychological tactics. Authorities aimed to shatter his silence, yet he responded with cryptic humor, mocking guards even through swollen lips. Stories circulated after his release that torture had only hardened his resolve. Whether exaggerated or not, Kazmi himself encouraged the myth. He claimed the experience taught him that pain was temporary, but silence could outlast chains and interrogators alike. He emerged with a sharpened ideology. To him, prison was not punishment but confirmation, proof that his activities carried weight. Torture became badge rather than scar, strengthening his self-image as someone tested, someone surviving trials ordinary men would never endure. Thus, imprisonment ironically elevated him. It baptized his reputation in suffering, transforming him into a figure militants admired. Instead of neutralizing Kazmi, prison fed his mythos, ensuring his name traveled further beyond the walls meant to contain him. After his release in the early 2000s, Kazmi gravitated toward Hamas's clandestine wing. His reputation as an escape planner made him too valuable to remain independent. Senior operatives quietly approached him, offering protection, resources, and a platform to institutionalize his skills. Kazmi accepted, but with conditions. He refused roles involving public speeches or overt leadership. Instead, he negotiated for autonomy over special logistics, a euphemism for jailbreak planning, smuggling routes, and covert communications. Hamas, recognizing his rare expertise, granted unusual freedom. In parallel, Kazmi cultivated a smaller circle of protégés. He handpicked young recruits skilled in mechanics, forgery, and engineering. This group, informally nicknamed the Keysmiths, became his laboratory, where innovative techniques of escape were tested, refined, and deployed in the field. By 2004, Israeli security identified patterns linking multiple jailbreak attempts across Gaza and West Bank prisons. Despite varying methods, the fingerprints of one mind emerged: forged maintenance requests, synchronized blackouts, and tunnels disguised as sewage repairs. Investigators began labeling this phenomenon the Kazmi signature. Kazmi also sought international networks. He traveled discreetly, sometimes under false passports, to Lebanon and Syria. There he exchanged knowledge with Hezbollah operatives, learning advanced counter-surveillance techniques, and in return, teaching lockpicking, forgery, and how to dismantle prison architecture from within. His reach extended into criminal underworlds. He contracted smugglers from Sinai and counterfeiters from Jordan, blending militancy with organized crime. These partnerships blurred moral lines but amplified capacity. For Kazmi, ideology and pragmatism merged. Liberation was impossible without leveraging shadows beyond politics. Israeli analysts feared this evolution most. No longer was Kazmi simply a clever individual. He had become the nucleus of a structured unit, resilient against single-point failures. His skills multiplied, replicated through disciples, and embedded into Hamas's wider operational infrastructure. Thus, Kazmi transitioned from solitary planner to founder of a clandestine cadre. His imprint spread like ink on porous paper, irreversible and expanding. By mid-decade, his reputation exceeded local legend, transforming him into an international threat etched on intelligence watch lists. By 2006, Kazmi's operations had grown more audacious. What began as jailbreak planning expanded into full-scale smuggling. He coordinated tunnels beneath Rafah that moved not only prisoners, but weapons, cash, and medical supplies, transforming subterranean passageways into arteries sustaining Hamas's clandestine infrastructure. Israeli intelligence noted his fingerprints on kidnappings. One notorious case involved a border ambush where militants abducted a soldier, later exchanged for dozens of Palestinian prisoners. Though never publicly named, whispers in intelligence briefings credited Kazmi's logistical genius behind the abduction. His strategies blurred lines between humanitarian necessity and militant aggression. He smuggled antibiotics alongside explosives, forged passports for families alongside operatives. To supporters, he was savior. To adversaries, he was the spider spinning lethal webs across Gaza's suffocating walls. Kazmi innovated methods to evade detection. Trucks carrying flour concealed hidden compartments, while funeral processions disguised fugitives in coffins. Each successful deception emboldened him further. His operations evolved into a theater of misdirection, where even grief could camouflage rebellion's logistics. By 2008, targeted killings increased in Gaza, but Kazmi adapted by relocating frequently. Damascus, Beirut, and occasionally Cairo became his bases. From these hubs, he engineered operations remotely, ensuring his presence remained ghost-like. Felt everywhere, witnessed nowhere, a phantom puppeteer. His tactics hardened. While earlier missions emphasized escape, later ones facilitated executions. Rivals accused him of orchestrating killings against suspected informants, their bodies discovered with chilling precision. Whether true or propaganda, the accusations cemented his reputation as a man wielding shadows ruthlessly. International actors began monitoring. Jordanian intelligence flagged counterfeit passports linked to his circle. Egyptian authorities discovered smuggling trails into Sinai. Each revelation added to the dossier, portraying Kazmi not merely as planner, but as transnational insurgent shaping battlefields beyond Gaza. Thus, smuggling, kidnappings, and killings became milestones in Kazmi's evolution. His legend, once built on ingenuity, now carried darker undertones. He was no longer simply unlocking prisons, he was unlocking chaos, bending every border, law, and human boundary into a weaponized tool. In May 2002, Israeli authorities reported an audacious escape from Katziat prison. 3 inmates vanished during a sandstorm. Investigators later discovered a crude tunnel concealed beneath a storage shed. Intelligence traced the blueprint to Kazmi, whose fingerprints matched sketches recovered from confiscated notebooks. In July 2004, during a Gaza courthouse transfer, guards were distracted by a staged medical emergency. Amid the chaos, 2 detainees slipped away in an ambulance rigged with false panels. Israeli officials quietly concluded Kazmi had orchestrated the ruse remotely. By November 2006, tunnels at Rafah expanded under his guidance. These passages not only funneled supplies, but became escape pipelines. Egyptian authorities intercepted one attempt involving fugitives disguised as laborers. Their forged papers traced directly to Kazmi's clandestine keysmith's workshop in Khan Yunis. June 2007 brought darker notoriety. During factional violence in Gaza, rival informants were kidnapped and executed. Anonymous Hamas sources hinted Kazmi had coordinated logistics, arranging safe houses and vehicles. Whether mastermind or facilitator, his name again surfaced as shadowy architect behind calculated disappearances. In December 2008, amid Israel's Operation Cast Lead, he coordinated the extraction of wounded militants from collapsing neighborhoods. Smuggled through disguised aid convoys, these survivors re-emerged weeks later. For Hamas, this was proof Kazmi could outmaneuver chaos. For Israel, it confirmed persistent menace. September 2009 marked his international footprint. A Jordanian sting exposed counterfeit passports linked to Kazmi's network. Authorities uncovered meticulous forgery equipment, holograms, and identity kits. Analysts concluded his ambition extended beyond Gaza, preparing safe passage corridors stretching from Amman to Beirut. January 2010 set the stage for his fatal finale. Bahraini intelligence reportedly monitored suspicious entries. men with European passports, short hotel stays, and strange luggage. Kazmi arrived in Manama, believing Bahrain safer than Damascus. Yet silent hunters had already encircled him. Each operation told a story of evolution. From tunnels to kidnappings, forgeries to disappearances, the pattern was unmistakable. Step by step, Kazmi had become more than fugitive planner. He was symbol of persistence, and therefore, an inevitable target for elimination. By 2010, Nasir Kazmi's activities had carved him into the upper tier of international watch lists. What began as scattered intelligence memos evolved into thick dossiers, his name appearing on briefing slides in Tel Aviv, Washington, Cairo, and even Brussels. Israel's Shin Bet labeled him a strategic enabler, emphasizing his logistical genius that multiplied Hamas's resilience. He was not the man with the rifle, but the architect ensuring rifles, recruits, and fugitives reach their destinations, undetected and operationally ready. Interpol quietly flagged multiple aliases linked to his forged passports. European airports began circulating internal notices, warning of identities traced to Kazmi's workshop. His invisible hand had extended into bureaucracies once considered beyond his reach, alarming international counterterrorism agencies. By 2007, American intelligence analysts listed him in classified threat assessments. Washington viewed him not simply as Hamas operative, but as innovator, whose escape methodologies could be exported to other groups, from Hezbollah to global jihadist networks, multiplying destabilization across regions. Egypt publicly condemned him after uncovering tunnels leading into Sinai. Officials declared his operations a threat to national security, signaling Cairo's frustration at how his smuggling undermined sovereignty. Their denunciation mirrored growing consensus. Kazmi's ingenuity destabilized more than Israel alone. Qatar and Syria offered protection, framing him as freedom fighter. In Damascus, he was sheltered within circles tied to Hamas leadership. Yet even allies quietly admitted his rising notoriety drew heat, making his presence as dangerous as it was useful. Within Hamas, his myth expanded. Recruits whispered about the man who could open any door. Commanders valued him, yet some feared dependency. His survival became crucial, not just for operations, but for the morale of cadres envisioning liberation. Israeli assassination units placed him on priority rosters. His file circulated through Mossad branches, marked with the code Emerald, denoting high-value but elusive targets. Surveillance footage, intercepted calls, and human sources all contributed, yet Kazmi consistently evaded the tightening noose. Each failed capture attempt only magnified his threat profile. Newspapers occasionally reported anonymous planners, but intelligence officials knew the truth. Kazmi had become a ghost whose capture, or death, would be a symbolic triumph in the shadow war against Hamas. Thus, by the end of the decade, his position was sealed. From Gaza's alleys to international terminals, Kazmi embodied defiance. Every list, every designation, every surveillance file confirmed a chilling reality. He was living on borrowed time, hunted by entire states. The first credible attempt came in 2005, when a car bomb detonated outside a Damascus safe house. Syrian officials blamed rogue militants, but intelligence chatter suggested Mossad involvement. Kazmi had left minutes earlier, an absence later attributed to his obsessive habit of unpredictability. In 2006, while traveling through Sinai, a drone strike narrowly missed his convoy. Egyptian authorities confirmed an explosion, but denied targeting him. Witnesses described charred vehicles, yet Kazmi emerged unscathed, his escape attributed to last-minute route changes executed without explanation. By 2007, poison was allegedly deployed. Reports surfaced of a tainted tea served in Beirut. Kazmi fell violently ill, bedridden for days. His associates claimed Israeli operatives had laced his drink, though proof remained elusive. The myth, however, endured. The following year, an improvised device was planted under a hotel mattress in Damascus. Security forces intercepted it before detonation. Syrian state media blamed Zionist agents, while Hamas quietly circulated the story, using it to amplify Kazmi's growing aura of invincibility. In 2008, during Operation Cast Lead, Israeli aircraft targeted a building in Gaza where he was rumored to hide. The strike leveled the structure, killing several militants. Yet Kazmi was not there. Survivors whispered about supernatural timing guiding his absence. By 2009, European security services intercepted suspicious travelers in Vienna carrying equipment resembling surveillance kits. Analysts speculated a botched Mossad mission aimed at Kazmi during one of his discreet trips. The detained operatives vanished quietly, fueling theories of diplomatic cover shielding their withdrawal. Kazmi himself seemed amused by the attempts. To confidants he quipped, "They send bombs, I send laughter." Yet behind the bravado lay mounting paranoia. He shifted lodgings frequently, trusted fewer people, and increasingly relied on forged identities for daily survival. Hamas leadership worried. Each attempt risked collateral damage, exposing safe houses and networks. Kazmi's survival was celebrated, yet his presence attracted danger. Allies debated whether protecting him was worth the escalating risks, though none dared sever ties with the elusive strategist. Israel, undeterred, escalated its campaign. Analysts observed a tightening pattern: improved surveillance, closer tracking of his aliases, refined coordination with allied intelligence. Kazmi's luck, once mythologized, was increasingly framed as mere statistical inevitability awaiting expiration. Thus, assassination attempts became chapters in his legend. Each failure strengthened his myth, but also painted him brighter on intelligence maps. Every narrow escape was less miracle than countdown, ticking toward a final encounter neither side could indefinitely postpone. By late 2009, the pattern was undeniable. Surveillance tightened, assassination attempts multiplied, and whispers spread in militant circles that Kazmi's days were numbered. Even his closest allies spoke in hushed tones, as if acknowledging fate would hasten its arrival. Kazmi himself appeared increasingly fatalistic. Though still cautious, he joked about meeting angels in disguise. His meticulous habits, third-floor hotel rooms, counterclockwise tea stirring, now seemed like rituals of a man bargaining with destiny rather than escaping it. Intelligence assessments reflected this inevitability. Western analysts described him as a high-value target whose survival defies probability. Mossad files thick with failed attempts marked him as unfinished business. The question was no longer if he would fall, but when. Even his network sensed the shift. Protégé quietly assumed leadership roles, preparing for continuity in his absence. His own precautions became paradoxical. Each forged passport, each sudden relocation, only underscored the desperation of a man outrunning shadows closing in. Thus, inevitability hung heavy in the air. The final act was foreshadowed not by one event, but by the cumulative weight of near misses, failed assassinations, and prophetic whispers. The stage was set, awaiting the fatal curtain fall in Manama. The story of Nasir Kazmi cannot be untangled from the wider conflict between Israel and Hamas. His rise was both symptom and response, forged inside a battlefield where politics, religion, and occupation blended into a conflict without borders, truces, or permanence. Hamas emerged in 1987 during the First Intifada, born from the Muslim Brotherhood's networks. Unlike Fatah's secular nationalist roots, Hamas combined political activism with militant resistance. For Israel, it represented not just opposition, but an ideological adversary unwilling to compromise. By the 1990s, after the Oslo Accords promised peace, the divide sharpened. Fatah pursued diplomacy, while Hamas doubled down on resistance. This fracture fractured Palestinian society itself, creating competing visions of liberation, negotiations across tables, or resistance across barricades. Kazmi belonged firmly to the latter camp. His obsession with jailbreaks reflected Hamas's fixation on sustaining its militant infrastructure. Each prisoner freed became another soldier, another recruiter, another planner. Continuity in human form, ensuring the movement's endurance despite mounting casualties. Israel, in turn, saw imprisonment as central to control. Thousands of Palestinians were incarcerated for security offenses. Prisons became microcosms of the broader conflict, spaces where ideology sharpened, alliances formed, and figures like Kazmi discovered their purpose through resistance against confinement. The Second Intifada, 2000-2005, escalated these dynamics. Suicide bombings, Israeli incursions, and targeted assassinations defined the era. Hamas expanded its reach, while Israel adopted increasingly aggressive countermeasures. It was in this cauldron that planners like Kazmi transformed from irritants into existential threats. Regional geopolitics layered additional complexity. Iran funneled support, Hezbollah offered training, and Syria provided refuge. The conflict was never solely local. It became proxy battleground where global powers tested strategies, technology, and influence by backing their chosen allies in shadow wars. Meanwhile, Western capitals debated labels. To Washington and Brussels, Hamas was a terrorist organization. To Doha and Tehran, it was a resistance movement. These competing definitions shaped policy, aid, and clandestine operations, all converging to amplify the stakes surrounding figures like Kazmi. For Gaza's civilians, however, the broader conflict manifested as blockade, unemployment, and bombardment. Families struggled while militants strategized and foreign powers maneuvered. It was this environment, suffocating, volatile, polarized, that forged Kazmi's mindset and sustained the demand for his clandestine expertise. Thus, his personal trajectory mirrored the conflict itself, cyclical, escalating, and unresolvable. Each prison break echoed the broader desire for liberation, while each assassination attempt mirrored the relentless repression. Kazmi was both player and pawn in a regional struggle without foreseeable end. Israel's position was unequivocal. Hamas represented an existential threat, and operatives like Kazmi were legitimate targets. Tel Aviv viewed every tunnel, forged passport, and jailbreak as direct assaults on state security. Eliminating him was framed as preemptive defense rather than retaliation. The United States mirrored this stance, designating Hamas a terrorist organization and aligning with Israel's counterterrorism goals. Washington considered Kazmi's skills transferable to global networks. Officials feared his techniques might inspire jailbreaks or smuggling operations far beyond the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. European nations walked a finer line. Britain and Germany condemned Hamas publicly, yet intelligence reports revealed quiet concern about Mossad's extrajudicial operations. European governments tolerated surveillance, but recoiled at assassinations staged in hotels or using forged passports across their jurisdictions. Egypt occupied an ambivalent position. Publicly opposing Hamas, Cairo condemned Kazmi's smuggling tunnels undermining sovereignty in Sinai. Yet Egyptian intelligence occasionally leveraged contacts within his networks, extracting information about jihadist flows, balancing suppression with pragmatism in a region riddled with overlapping threats. Qatar openly supported Hamas's political leadership, funding projects in Gaza and offering sanctuary to figures linked with the movement. While officials rarely mentioned Kazmi by name, their backing created safe havens from which operatives like him drew indirect cover. Syria offered direct refuge. Damascus housed Hamas's external leadership, shielding militants from Israeli reach. Kazmi spent intermittent years there, enjoying protection, yet living under constant awareness that foreign intelligence services could breach even Syria's heavily monitored sanctuaries when geopolitical winds shifted. Iran provided financial and military support, eager to weaponize Hamas as proxy against Israel. For Tehran, figures like Kazmi represented more than militants. They were instruments of asymmetric warfare, undermining Israel without direct confrontation, reinforcing Iran's influence across the Levant. Jordan opposed Hamas's militant operations, expelling leadership in the 1990s. However, Kazmi's passport networks repeatedly touched Amman, frustrating authorities. Jordanian intelligence kept him under watch, occasionally intercepting his operatives, underscoring the regional challenge of containing a figure whose operations transcended borders. Bahrain's position was delicate. Aligned with Western allies, it condemned Hamas yet preferred to avoid entanglement. Kazmi's eventual assassination in Manama dragged Bahrain unwillingly into the shadows of espionage, highlighting how neutral ground can become theater for geopolitical vendettas. Thus, countries' positions reflected divergent strategies. Some hunted him, others shielded him, still others exploited him. Kazmi existed not only within Hamas's ranks, but within a geopolitical chessboard, where alliances and hostilities ensured his life remained both protected and hunted simultaneously. Nasir Kazmi mattered because he was not simply another operative. He embodied Hamas's ability to adapt. While others carried rifles, he carried blueprints. His brilliance lay not in combat, but in transforming vulnerability, prisons, borders, blockades, into theaters of resistance and opportunity. He mattered because prisons defined the conflict. Thousands of Palestinians cycled through cells each year. Every escape he engineered undermined Israel's control, turning incarceration from tool of deterrence into temporary inconvenience. Each freed prisoner reinvigorated Hamas, replenishing cadres otherwise destined for political oblivion. Kazmi's expertise symbolized ingenuity under oppression. He proved that even within suffocating walls, systems could be cracked. For militants, this resilience offered psychological victory. It reassured supporters that resistance was not futile, but endlessly renewable through resourcefulness and cunning. To Israel, he mattered as a persistent reminder of vulnerabilities. His operations mocked billion-dollar surveillance systems and reinforced perceptions that no prison or checkpoint was fully secure. Neutralizing him became symbolic proof that Israel could still dominate a battlefield increasingly defined by shadows. Internationally, Kazmi's mattering stemmed from exportability. His methods, tunnels, forged documents, coded communication, were tools any militant group could copy. Intelligence services feared that his keysmiths network might become a model, spreading tactics across insurgencies from Lebanon to Iraq, multiplying instability exponentially. He mattered to Hamas leadership as morale's anchor. While charismatic spokesmen rallied crowds, Kazmi's silent logistics ensured continuity. His existence reassured commanders that operational pipelines could survive blockades and raids. Without him, Hamas risked operational paralysis in the face of constant attrition. Kazmi also embodied the blurred boundary between crime and insurgency. His smuggling connected militants to black markets, weaving Hamas into global illicit economies. This made him uniquely dangerous. He operated simultaneously in militant, political, and criminal spheres, difficult to isolate or dismantle. For regional powers, he represented leverage. His survival or death could signal alignment. Hosting him meant defiance. Expelling him meant cooperation. Thus, Kazmi became bargaining chip within larger geopolitical negotiations, his life symbolizing shifts in alliances across the Middle East. Symbolically, he mattered because he was legend. His near-mythical escapes, his obsessive quirks, his survival against repeated assassination attempts, all elevated him into folklore. Legends inspire, recruit, and outlive their creators. Neutralizing Kazmi therefore became not only tactical, but psychological necessity. Ultimately, Kazmi mattered because he forced recognition of the shadow war. His life was evidence that modern conflict extends beyond battlefields, into prisons, tunnels, hotels, and forgeries. Eliminating him meant striking at the narrative of defiance itself, not just one man. On January 10, 2010, the first operatives landed in Bahrain aboard Gulf Air Flight 972. They traveled under forged European passports, blending among tourists. Immigration officials stamped their documents without hesitation, unaware these identities were carefully manufactured months earlier in clandestine workshops. The team moved discreetly, reserving separate hotel rooms across Manama. They carried minimal luggage, their attire chosen for deliberate blandness. Nothing about them suggested connection, yet they communicated through encrypted devices, coordinating movements with clinical precision refined over countless dry runs. Each operative had specific cover. One posed as a tennis coach, another as a businessman scouting property investments. Their backgrounds were rehearsed meticulously, prepared for casual conversations that might arise with curious hotel staff or unsuspecting fellow guests. Intelligence sources later reconstructed their entries. Surveillance footage showed calm faces, no nervous gestures, no haste. The discipline of seasoned agents was evident. They passed through airports like ghosts, leaving no trace except stamped passports and carefully planted alibis. Behind them, Mossad's logistics team ensured smooth passage. Flight itineraries were staggered to avoid suspicion. Cash was distributed in varied currencies. Even hotel reservations were made under agencies specializing in luxury bookings, shielding the operatives beneath layers of civilian bureaucracy. Within 48 hours, more arrivals trickled in. A woman carrying a tennis racket case joined the group, completing the cell. Bahrain's cosmopolitan cover, tourists, bankers, athletes, allowed them anonymity. Kazmi's hunters had arrived hidden in plain sight, unnoticed by authorities. Their primary task at this stage was not elimination, but preparation. They scouted routes, mapped hotel layouts, and tested surveillance blind spots. Each operative rehearsed cover stories while memorizing details about elevators, staircases, and security access points within their target's vicinity. Thus, before Kazmi even set foot in Manama, the stage was being meticulously set. Operatives melted into the city's luxury backdrop, patient and invisible. The opening act of the assassination unfolded not with violence, but with flawless choreography of infiltration. On January 12, 2010, the operatives began converging on the Diplomat Radisson Blu Hotel. They checked in separately under varied aliases, occupying rooms spread across different floors. Their presence appeared innocuous. Businessmen with briefcases, athletes with gear, travelers with rehearsed nonchalance. The hotel lobby, bustling with conferences and tourists, provided natural camouflage. Agents lingered casually, blending with international guests. Some read newspapers in the cafe, others pretended to hold phone calls. Beneath the surface, every action masked coordinated observation of staff routines. Kazmi arrived later that evening, checking into room 317. He appeared relaxed, traveling with minimal luggage, believing Bahrain's luxury environment insulated him from threats. Surveillance footage showed him nod politely to clerks, unaware predators already circled nearby. Operatives assigned to shadow him switched roles frequently. One followed discreetly into elevators, another lingered outside restaurants. They studied his habits, his choice of breakfast, his evening strolls, his tendency to secure third-floor accommodations. Each pattern was logged meticulously into encrypted notes. Hotel staff remained unsuspecting. Operatives distributed small gratuities, cultivating friendliness. They memorized master key procedures, noting which employees had access. A female operative struck casual conversations, extracting information about housekeeping schedules and security patrols, without ever raising suspicion of ulterior motives. Surveillance extended beyond the hotel. Rental cars tailed Kazmi discreetly when he ventured into Manama's streets. Operatives rotated vehicles, ensuring no pattern emerged. Even casual walks to nearby shops were tracked, his every step forming part of a larger behavioral map. Inside the hotel, cameras were quietly tested. Operatives timed blind spots, particularly along corridors leading to Kazmi's room. They rehearsed movements at night, simulating approach and withdrawal. Each rehearsal minimized the margin of error for the impending operation. Thus, by January 13th, the net had closed invisibly. Kazmi carried himself as guest, yet unknowingly starred in a theater of surveillance. Every glance, gesture, and movement was catalogued. The assassins did not merely watch, they choreographed destiny behind hotel walls. January 14, 2010 dawned quietly in Manama. The city's glass towers shimmered in morning light, masking invisible tension. In room 317, Nasir Kazmi sipped tea stirred counterclockwise, performing his ritual. Across the hotel, unseen operatives prepared to script his final day. Surveillance began at breakfast. Kazmi descended casually, ordering coffee and bread. A male operative sat 2 tables away, reading a newspaper upside down to mask glances. Another agent lingered near reception, confirming Kazmi's itinerary through subtle observation of his keycard usage. Midday, Kazmi visited nearby shops. He browsed electronics, purchased toiletries. Shadowing agents rotated discreetly, changing vehicles, altering walking pace. To bystanders, he was a solitary traveler. To operatives, he was a target rehearsing his last errands unknowingly, under precise orchestration. By afternoon, operatives convened in 2s and 3s, disguised as casual acquaintances. They adjusted plans in whispers, synchronizing watches. Final rehearsal notes confirmed Kazmi's room, routines, and vulnerabilities. Their strategy: strike in evening hours, exploiting housekeeping schedules and hotel corridors' blind spots. At 5 p.m., Kazmi returned, appearing tired. He phoned briefly, then locked himself inside his room. Across the hall, an operative pretended to adjust luggage. Another stood near elevators, casually scrolling a phone, both silently marking his return. As dusk fell, operatives rehearsed final entry. A female agent engaged housekeeping in conversation, ensuring knowledge of staff rotations. Male counterparts prepared lock tools, concealed within innocuous items. Each movement was timed, ensuring minutes of access would appear like routine hotel service. At 8 p.m., Kazmi ordered dinner. Room service delivered his meal, noted by surveillance. Operatives waited patiently, giving him time to eat, rest, and lower guard. Their strategy hinged on patience. Striking too early risked disrupting natural rhythms. By 10 p.m., the hotel's corridors quieted. Businessmen retired, conferences ended, tourists vanished to rooms. Silence settled, broken only by muted televisions. Within that silence, operatives moved, one scouting stairwells, another verifying surveillance feeds still operated with exploitable blind spots. Minutes before 11 p.m., the green light was given. Agents converged near room 317, disguises flawless, movements casual. Their plan demanded surgical precision: enter, neutralize, stage natural death, and exit without raising suspicion. Every detail rehearsed now awaited real execution. Thus, January 14th closed not as ordinary day, but as countdown. While Manama slept, shadows synchronized. For Kazmi, rituals ended. For operatives, choreography reached climax. The stage was set. The curtain awaited its cold, irreversible fall. The operation hinged on precision tools carried in seemingly innocent containers. Lockpicking sets disguised as grooming kits allowed operatives to bypass electronic keycards. Each pick was crafted to leave no visible tampering, ensuring hotel staff would later find nothing amiss. Communication relied on encrypted earpieces hidden beneath hair and scarves. Short bursts of data transmitted across local networks coordinated movements. Operatives avoided cellular calls, instead using silent vibrations as signals, an orchestration where silence spoke louder than words. A medical kit contained syringes loaded with paralytic agents. Unlike firearms or explosives, these tools offered quiet efficiency. The drug-induced respiratory failure mimicking heart attack, leaving no obvious trace. Ideal for assassination staged as natural deaths in controlled environments. Miniature cameras were concealed in luggage handles, giving operatives corridor views without raising suspicion. These wireless feeds ensured no guard or guest interrupted. Every movement was documented, creating a live rehearsal before execution, reducing reliance on fallible human eyesight alone. For entry timing, operatives relied on jammers disrupting electronic door logs. A brief interference allowed unnoticed entry, later erased by resetting systems. Such tampering left digital gaps, but appeared like routine technical glitches to untrained hotel administrators reviewing logs. Disguises also played critical roles. Tennis rackets, sports gear, and briefcases crafted illusions of ordinary guests. Within these props lay lock kits, syringes, and encrypted devices. To casual eyes, nothing seemed extraordinary. To trained operatives, each item doubled as weaponized disguise. The staging kit contained items to mimic natural death, prescription bottles with fabricated labels, medical forms, and even a portable defibrillator shell. These props ensured investigators might initially attribute demise to health complications rather than assassination orchestrated by unseen hands. Thus, the arsenal was not loud, but surgical. Where armies relied on tanks and missiles, operatives wielded silence, deception, and subtle chemistry. Each tool symbolized modern espionage's philosophy: power not through spectacle, but through invisibility cloaked in ordinary objects. The corridor outside room 317 was quiet, too quiet. An operative lingered, disguised as weary guest fumbling with luggage. Another adjusted a shoe, buying seconds. Each gesture was casual facade, concealing razor-sharp synchronization behind blank, forgettable expressions. At one point, a hotel guest unexpectedly stepped into the hallway. Operatives froze, disguises intact. A polite nod, a murmured greeting. Then the guest disappeared into another room. A brush with discovery dissolved into silence, yet adrenaline surged. Inside surveillance hub, encrypted earpieces crackled faintly. One operative whispered confirmation. Cameras remained blind for 90 seconds. Timing tightened. Every second carried dual weight. Freedom if unnoticed, exposure if miscalculated. Precision was currency, hesitation equaled failure, possibly international scandal. A cleaner unexpectedly rolled a trolley past elevators, pausing briefly near Kazmi's door. Operatives smiled politely, masking impatience. When she left, silence reclaimed corridor. The hunters exhaled collectively, tension winding tighter, rehearsals collapsing into irreversible reality. Thus suspense climaxed not in explosions, but in stillness. Every footstep, every key turned, every second of waiting brimmed with menace. The hotel remained oblivious, yet within its polished walls, history's balance tilted silently toward death masked as slumber. Near midnight, operatives entered room 317 using disguised lockpicks. The door opened silently, revealing Kazmi asleep, television flickering faintly. His ritual counterclockwise tea glass rested unfinished on the table. Predators stood at the threshold, silent intruders in the sanctuary of routine. One operative administered the paralytic injection with surgical precision, slipping needle into exposed flesh of his neck. Kazmi stirred faintly, confusion flickering before paralysis set in. Within seconds, breath faltered, eyes froze. The hunters had claimed their prize. They staged the scene with meticulous care. Empty prescription bottles were placed on the nightstand. Bedding was straightened. Air conditioning lowered to mass time of death. Every detail was sculpted to suggest heart failure, not assassination by foreign operatives. Minutes later, they exited calmly. Surveillance gaps shielded their movements. Corridors remained empty. Elevators functioned without interruption. Operatives dispersed into separate rooms, blending once more as tourists, athletes, and businessmen. Within 20 minutes, room 317's secret had already evaporated. Nasir Kazmi's life ended without sound, without struggle, without witnesses. His legend concluded not in battlefield heroics, but in silence engineered by statecraft. History's stage claimed another ghost, erased by hands that would never sign their names. The following morning, January 15, 2010, housekeeping staff knocked repeatedly on room 317. Receiving no response, they entered with a master key. Inside, they found Nasir Kazmi lying motionless on the bed, television still humming softly in the background. At first glance, the scene suggested natural death. His expression was calm, eyes half closed, blankets neatly arranged. Beside him sat unfinished tea and prescription bottles. Nothing appeared disturbed, no signs of forced entry, no evidence of violent struggle. Staff panicked, calling hotel security, who in turn contacted Bahraini police. Within minutes, corridors buzzed with quiet urgency. Guests whispered as authorities cordoned the area. Manama's glittering calm was punctured by whispers of espionage and unseen assassins. Initial reports framed the discovery cautiously. Officials hinted at cardiac arrest, citing prescription bottles near the bed. Local newspapers published subdued headlines. Foreign guest found dead in Manama hotel. Yet intelligence agencies instantly suspected assassination masked beneath ordinary explanations. Thus, discovery shifted quickly from tragedy to intrigue. A man feared across borders was now reduced to a still figure in a hotel bed. For investigators, the scene marked beginning of a mystery destined to reverberate across continents. Bahraini authorities transported Kazmi's body swiftly to a medical facility for examination. Official statements maintained caution, citing preliminary signs of cardiac failure. Yet whispers circulated immediately. Seasoned militants rarely collapsed conveniently, especially within foreign hotels far from battlefields or prisons. Forensic teams noted subtle irregularities. Small puncture marks were discovered on his neck, easily overlooked at first inspection. Bruising patterns suggested pressure inconsistent with ordinary sleep. These details hinted at external intervention, though officials hesitated to declare assassination without irrefutable proof. Toxicology tests revealed traces of muscle relaxants, compounds rarely prescribed to healthy men of Kazmi's age. While not conclusively lethal, combined effects with injected agents could mimic natural cardiac arrest. Investigators quietly debated whether results represented medical anomaly or deliberate orchestration. International intelligence liaisons requested access to reports. Bahraini officials resisted, balancing alliance obligations with fear of entanglement. Publicly, doctors released bland statements. Privately, the word assassination circulated in cautious tones, recognized yet unspoken, lingering like shadow across medical charts and sterile laboratories. Thus, the autopsy deepened mystery rather than resolved it. Science whispered evidence of precision killing, while politics demanded ambiguity. In death, as in life, Kazmi's story unfolded through contradiction, where truth remained cloaked beneath layers of denial and fear. Investigators turned quickly to hotel CCTV, reviewing hours of footage. At first, recordings showed nothing unusual: guests checking in, staff moving about, elevators opening and closing. Yet, when cross-referenced, patterns emerged. The same faces reappearing, disconnected yet orbiting around room 317. Frames captured a woman with tennis racket case, a man pretending to fumble luggage, another seated calmly in the cafe. Their appearances seemed innocent in isolation. Together they formed choreography of surveillance, circling Kazmi without revealing connection. When footage was broadcast globally, journalists pounced. Newspapers splashed grainy stills, operatives wearing baseball caps, sunglasses, suits. Each image fueled speculation. Who were these travelers? Why had they converged on Manama? And how had they vanished immediately after Kazmi's death? The scandal escalated when passport numbers were traced. Several belonged to real European citizens living abroad. Their identities had been stolen, manipulated into perfect forgeries. Outrage erupted in capitals: London, Paris, Berlin, demanding explanations as innocent names became masks for killers. Diplomatic fallout accelerated. Britain summoned Israeli ambassadors, furious at citizens' identities exploited. Ireland, Germany, and France joined chorus, calling the act state-sponsored identity theft. Denials from Tel Aviv were vague, neither confirming nor denying Mossad's involvement, only fueling suspicion. For Bahrain, revelation was humiliating. Their luxury hotels, symbols of security and prosperity, had been used as theater for international assassination. Officials faced uncomfortable scrutiny, accused of negligence or complicity, struggling to balance alliance with Western partners and regional sensitivities. CCTV footage became infamous, replayed endlessly on news networks. Each freeze frame turned operatives into ghostly celebrities, their anonymity paradoxically magnified. Audiences worldwide glimpsed mechanics of modern assassination: casual movements masking meticulous coordination, tourists disguising predators. Suspense spilled from espionage files into public imagination. Thus, the scandal transcended Kazmi's death. It spotlighted tradecraft of forged passports, covert surveillance, and silent elimination. The aftermath transformed assassination into diplomatic crisis, igniting debates over sovereignty, espionage ethics, and the reach of invisible wars waged inside five-star hotels. Kazmi's death quickly transcended regional intrigue, morphing into international scandal. Governments condemned the operation, not because a Hamas operative had been eliminated, but because sovereign spaces, hotels, airports, passports, had been weaponized. Espionage spilled into ordinary life, challenging illusions of civilian safety. Britain expelled Israeli diplomats, furious at stolen identities of its citizens. Germany demanded explanations for passports replicated with surgical accuracy. Ireland launched investigations, accusing Mossad of reckless disregard for international norms. Diplomatic cables bristled with indignation, alliances strained beneath unspoken recognition of espionage's inevitability. Israel neither confirmed nor denied involvement. Officials issued vague statements about threats to national security, evading direct accountability. This ambiguity became strategy, enabling plausible deniability while reminding adversaries of Mossad's reach. Silence in itself echoed louder than outright admission. Arab governments reacted unevenly. Bahrain scrambled to downplay its role, branding the assassination unwelcome intrusion. Qatar and Syria framed Kazmi as martyr, accusing Israel of arrogance. Egypt, though critical, privately welcomed removal of a destabilizing figure, undermining control over Sinai's volatile borderlands. Hamas seized narrative immediately. Leaders eulogized Kazmi as hero struck down by cowardly foreign assassins. Funeral processions became rallies. His death transformed into propaganda, inflaming anger, ensuring his legend outlived his body, inspiring new recruits eager to inherit unfinished struggle. Western intelligence agencies quietly admired Operation's precision. Public outrage masked private fascination. Internal reports described assassination as near flawless, despite diplomatic costs. The operation demonstrated Mossad's enduring ability to strike anywhere, reinforcing deterrence against adversaries plotting beyond Israel's immediate reach. Yet fallout lingered. European trust eroded. Intelligence sharing chilled temporarily. Bahrain's reputation as stable Gulf hub was stained. Hotels worldwide tightened security, fearing guest rooms could mask political killings. Kazmi's death proved no city, however cosmopolitan, could guarantee neutrality. Thus, the global stage absorbed shockwaves of one death. Beyond Gaza or Tel Aviv, Kazmi's assassination exposed fragility of international norms where diplomacy and espionage collided. The lesson was unmistakable. Shadow wars respected no borders, and no sanctuary remained untouchable. Behind every operation lay invisible structures, committees, offices, budget lines, bureaucracies cloaked in secrecy. Mossad did not simply appear in Manama by accident. Paperwork traveled silently, from coded authorizations in Tel Aviv to financial transfers, funding fake passports and five-star hotel rooms. This phantom bureaucracy resembled a corporation without branding. Departments handled logistics, recruitment, surveillance, and disinformation. Reports moved upward through layers of clearance until one final signature, anonymous, untraceable, triggered the machinery of assassination. Kazmi's death was as much paperwork as poison. Its agents were merely the visible edge of sprawling machinery. Behind them stood analysts monitoring satellite feeds, clerks processing cover identities, technicians programming encrypted channels. Each invisible functionary became co-conspirator, their signatures buried in classified archives never meant for sunlight. History whispered of these bureaucracies as shadow empires. They operated without election, immune to scrutiny, yet wielded power capable of shaping wars. Kazmi's death was not personal vendetta. It was bureaucratic outcome, processed like invoice, filed under resolved threat. The eerie power of such systems lay in their banality. Murder became itemized expense. A man's life reduced to spreadsheet cell. Kazmi's demise illustrated how modern assassination was less dagger in alley, more memo approved by unseen director. Every state maintained such phantom bureaucracies, some more discreet, others brazen. The shadow war was less battlefield clash than administrative competition, rival agencies racing to outmaneuver through paperwork disguised as diplomacy. Deaths became footnotes in ledgers of global intelligence empires. Thus, Kazmi's story illuminated an unsettling truth. He did not fall to lone assassin, but to invisible bureaucracy whose reach extended across continents. The phantom empire struck silently, leaving Bahrain's marble corridors haunted by ghosts of paperwork and precision. They were not soldiers in uniforms but phantoms in suits, track jackets, and tennis shoes. Mossad's elite units carried names whispered like legends: Kidon, Caesarea, Metzada. Each was mythic archetype, locksmiths of death, conjurers of disappearance, artisans of silence. Kidon, the tip of the spear, specialized in targeted assassinations. Operatives trained to vanish into hotel corridors, leaving only whispers. They studied poisons, disguises, and untraceable weapons, sculpting operations that resembled accidents, strokes, or sudden cardiac arrests. Caesarea, shadow architects, handled surveillance and infiltration. Their operatives mapped lives like cartographers, charting routines, contacts, and vulnerabilities. To them, Kazmi was not man, but pattern. His footsteps, meals, rituals, all transformed into data points feeding inevitable convergence of hunters and prey. Metzada orchestrated sabotage and psychological operations. They spread disinformation, planted stories, and staged diversions. When operatives entered Manama, Metzada ensured the world's attention looked elsewhere. These invisible playwrights controlled narrative, shaping perception long before and long after fatal strike. Together, these legions formed invisible army without banners, mythologized as gods of precision. Their reputations thrived on secrecy, surviving not through parades but through fear. For every exposed mission, dozens succeeded silently, leaving only legends carved into classified archives. Beirut, 1973. Commandos slipped ashore under moonlight, storming apartments where Palestinian leaders slept. Doors burst open, gunfire echoed, identities erased in minutes. The mission ended before dawn, leaving the city haunted, its survivors whispering of assassins who vanished like tides. Lillehammer, Norway, 1973. A mistaken target. Agents believed they had cornered Black September mastermind, but killed Moroccan waiter instead. Arrests followed, exposing Mossad cells. The error became legend, reminder that shadows stumble too, even as myths endure unbroken elsewhere. Tunisia, 1988. Khalil al-Wazir, Abu Jihad, was gunned down outside his villa. His death struck Hamas's predecessor with brutal precision. Newspapers called it state-sponsored execution. For operatives, it was another page in ledger, death itemized under bureaucratic resolve. Dubai, 2010. Mahmoud al-Mabhouh discovered dead in hotel bed, another Hamas figure silenced. CCTV revealed operatives disguised as tourists, triggering global scandal. The script felt eerily familiar. Passports forged, corridors stalked, death staged. Kazmi's fate echoed this template almost frame for frame. Damascus, 2008. Imad Mughniya, Hezbollah commander, killed by car bomb. His vehicle erupted in flames, leaving only fragments. Washington reportedly aided Mossad. Cooperation blurred borders of responsibility, showing assassination as shared language of states, not monopoly of single intelligence empire. Each mission unfolded like cinematic vignette. Ordinary places, villas, hotels, parking lots, transformed into theaters of death. Operatives were playwrights, staging final acts that ended lives, toppled leaders, and whispered warnings. Silence afterward screamed louder than explosions ever could. Kazmi's death thus joined chorus of echoes. His body in Manama mirrored Beirut's apartments, Tunisia's villa, Dubai's hotel. Each mission incomplete without next. Shadows thrive not on closure, but on repetition, unfinished stories written endlessly across clandestine history. Above operatives and analysts stood distant figures, prime ministers, defense ministers, intelligence chiefs. They signed papers with trembling pens, authorizing deaths they would never witness. Their power was absolute yet deniable, their signatures ghosts erased from official memory. These leaders played gods, pulling strings of invisible legions. Yet even gods were flawed, haunted by scandals, errors, miscalculations. They commanded storms, but feared exposure, trapped within paradox of omnipotence, veiled by perpetual silence and public denial. Kazmi's death was their handiwork, yet none would ever admit it. Puppet masters stayed behind curtains, their daggers hidden in policy memos. In shadows, divinity and bureaucracy fused, forging gods whose empire was measured in silence. Kazmi's body was returned to Gaza beneath heavy secrecy, his coffin draped in green flags of Hamas. Crowds surged through narrow streets, chanting his name, turning funeral procession into demonstration. Grief merged with defiance, mourning with militant pageantry. Leaders delivered fiery eulogies, declaring him martyr of resistance. Speeches framed his death not as defeat, but proof Israel feared his brilliance. His reputation soared instantly, elevated from strategist into folk hero, his myth sealed in chants. For Hamas, funeral was rallying cry. Recruits volunteered in droves, eager to inherit mantle of escape planner. His absence created vacuum, but myth of invincibility ensured his methods would be imitated, even exaggerated, by younger disciples. Israel braced for reprisals. Intelligence warned of retaliatory plots, jailbreak attempts, and kidnapping staged in his honor. Every checkpoint bristled with tension. Kazmi's funeral was not closure but ignition, fueling cycle of violence his life had always symbolized. Thus, immediate impact rippled violently. Family mourned privately, militants celebrated publicly, and adversaries calculated nervously. In Gaza's crowded alleys, his name echoed like anthem. In intelligence circles, his file was stamped terminated, though his legend had only just begun. Kazmi's assassination created immediate operational gaps within Hamas. Prisoner support networks faltered, smuggling lines temporarily collapsed, and jailbreak plans were shelved. Yet within months, protégés filled void, replicating his methods. His death slowed momentum, but failed to dismantle institutional knowledge. For Israel, operation was tactical success but diplomatic burden. While Kazmi's silence removed a thorn, the passport scandal strained alliances with European states. Strategic cost was measured not only in his elimination, but in trust eroded across Western intelligence partnerships. In Gaza, Kazmi's legend grew beyond proportion. Tales of his quirks, tea rituals, hotel habits became folklore. Stories circulated in prisons, inspiring inmates to dream of escapes. Even without him, myth fueled persistence, transforming defeat into narrative of endurance. Regionally, his death accelerated polarization. Qatar and Syria amplified martyrdom narrative, portraying him victim of foreign arrogance. Meanwhile, Egypt tightened borders, citing smuggling threats. His absence became tool for states shaping agendas, manipulating legacy to justify alliances or hostilities. Thus, long-term consequences transcended his physical absence. Kazmi survived in stories, in imitated blueprints, in whispered training sessions. The man was gone, yet shadow endured, proving assassinations eliminate bodies, but rarely erase ideas stitched into collective memory. In the end, Nasir Kazmi's death changed little in the grand scheme of geopolitics. Hamas endured, Israel hunted, and the cycle of shadow wars spun onward, relentless and unbroken across shifting battlefields. Yet his story revealed unsettling truths. Assassinations are not only about silencing men, but about shaping myths, bending narratives, and testing the limits of sovereign spaces. Hotels, airports, and cities become unwilling stages. Kazmi's fate underscored the essence of espionage. States sanction killers, bureaucracies script death, and truth dissolves into silence. In shadows, victories are temporary, but legends persist, haunting corridors where justice remains forever indistinguishable from vengeance.